going to see here. Okay, and yes, so welcome to the webinar celebrating World Wetlands Day 2021 and celebrating the wetland sites of Laois and Offaly. And delighted to be hosting the event. It's our first event for a long time. We sort of battened down the hatches and I've been lying low for the best part of a year. We'd normally have a lot of branch events and we do them live, and we've been hosting a series of events in Abbeyleix the last couple of winters, sort of discussing all sorts of wildlife and biodiversity and habitat sort of type topics, which has been really good and really well attended. So we've now moved into the modern COVID era and we're hosting webinars. So a few teething problems with Zoom, which is probably to be expected. But yeah, so the Wildlife Trust Laois Offaly Branch and Abbeyleix Bog hosting this one. Just briefly, the Wildlife Trust Laois Offaly Branch has been on the go since November 2013. And since then, we've been very busy on various things. We run a volunteer conservation work group. We do all our practical work, various things, help out with invasive species control, various projects, nature reserves, meadow establishment, seed collecting, all sorts of stuff, loads of tidy town stuff. We also have host events all the time and they're really well attended, and we've loads of partners that we team up with to do those, and we've really enjoyed those and had thousands of people sort of engage in nature and wildlife and habitats over the years. And then our third and thing we're probably most proud about is our Badger Club, which is our kids club to get the kids involved. And obviously that's more important now more than ever, with kids becoming more and more sort of detached from nature and stuff. So that's what we've been up to. You're going to hear a bit more about Abbeyleix Bog in a second from Chris, so I won't go down that road. And yeah, I just want to start by saying thanks to the panelists for speaking tonight on 5 very special sites across the 2 counties. The 2 counties are sort of best known for bogs, I suppose, in terms of wetlands. And they lack big lakes or anything like that, so they wouldn't be known as wetland counties, I suppose. But in their own right, there's some fantastic sites and bogs and places we're talking about. So going to get cracking. So just to start with Chris is from Abbeyleix Bog, one of the original sort of community activists that stopped Boardnamona moving in on the bog to cut the turf back 20 years ago, over 20 years ago now. And he stayed the course all that time. He's been there all the time. He is the talisman there. He says he's the cheap bottle washer, but he's certainly more than that to the branch or to the group. And he's also a founding member of the Community Wetlands Forum and its first coordinator. So he's a Namibian originally, but he knows more about bogs than he does about sand, I think, these days. So I'm going to let him crack on now if you're ready, Chris, and if you want to share your screen, and I'll shut up for a while. And I will give you, I mean, you've got sort of, 7 to 10 minutes, a bit more time now if Catherine doesn't arrive. And I'll let you go, and I'll give you a bit of warning if you're running over.
Thanks, Ricky.
Cheers,
I just want to try to get it on a full page here now. Sorry. Anyway, thanks very much for that. I'm going to do it slightly different at the moment, and I'm not going to go through a massive lot of slides and talk about detail. What I'm going to do is just a photographic or photo collage that I'm going to go through and explain things through that. Hopefully that'll help to understand. Okay, full screen mode. Right. If you look at this photograph from Abbeyleix Bog, it looks just like another big patch of land in Ireland. You don't associate that patch of land with wetlands, and but the interesting thing that you can see from that, just from that photograph, from that angle, is the land use impact that was had on that piece of land. First of all, let's start here in the corner, the left corner at the bottom here, and you can see houses and stuff. So that is the end, the end part of Abbeyleix, the town. So you can basically walk from the town of Abbeyleix right into this facility. Then this first green line here, which is an old railway track, and that connected Waterford all the way up to Mullingar. Then you have all sorts of lines across the picture here, and that is all drains that has been dug over the years. And then you see different vegetation types. You will see then in the middle the raised bog area and then cutaways along it. So this is typical, the impact that this area had by land use and people's impact on the land. But how does this look in terms of water? So if I have to show you the next slide, let's look at from a different perspective. Let's look at just the raised bog. And from that photograph with the raised bog area, one of the areas there, you can see actually the lines of the drains that were used to be there. These drains were blocked in 2009, but you can see the water in it. And that is basically what why peatlands or bogs are basically called wetlands, because they hold these massive lots of water and they're dependent on water. And obviously, from an hydrological point of view, bogs distinguish itself from other peatland types that it is dependent on rain, precipitation. That photograph there is taken as well from one of our local people in the area with his drones. The other interesting thing of that feature is the amount of drains that were put in the 80s by Bord na Móna. Those drains were blocked in 2009, and the impact of that and what the result of that was, I'll show you a little bit of that later on. Now, the second part of it is from a hydrological point of view, there are other areas that is influenced by water coming off the escarpment or surrounding areas, which is mineral water, where bogs are acidic, rainwater is acidic, peatlands are primarily acidic. You get a lot of these areas that gets flooded with water, mineral water coming into the area. And this is what makes this site so interesting. So now we start looking at the whole perspective of Abbeyleix Bog, or the whole area that you saw on the photograph from a different perspective. There's a lot of water, and depending on the water, you will then get different habitats. And for the sake of the project, over the time with the technical advisory group and there's experts that help us with the project was divided into, on the left hand, hydrological zones. That is basically areas how they have been impacted by land use, but then afterwards how the state of them in terms of water or water influx and going in and out. So that determines a different habitat as well. On the right hand side, you can look at this whole site again as to the impact that we had from drainage, from drains, again from the railway track in the middle. On the right hand side of the bog, you see a quarry here and the farms. So you can look at it from a different perspective. Then the other way is you can take all of these areas, and what we've done the last 2 years is to look at it from an ecological perspective, different habitats that formed, and these habitats the formation of them was dependent on the water and how wet the soils and the peat is. And we've gone and drilled down a little bit in each of these sections and do micro habitats and identify the micro habitats, because that'll inform how you manage the site in the future. Now, apart from looking at it from a hydrological perspective, the hydrology of it and how wet it is then determines the type of plants and the combination of plants, and that gives you different habitats. Here you see the typical raised bog, which is slightly degraded in our case at the time. And then the bottom you see a part of the old cutaway areas that is been sort of gone in a different direction because the peat is slightly drier. Then you can have some other transition areas or lagg zones or bog woodland areas. That is a sort of a transition area between mineral waters and acidic waters. And at the bottom, you have these sort of wet carr areas or wet woodlands, or what they call lagg zones, different types of them, which is swamps. Some people call it swamps, swampy areas. And this was, some of these areas were all sort of cutaway areas that developed into all of this type of habitats. So hydrology is one way of looking at it. Hydrology determines your habitats, and that's why the whole Abbeyleix Bog is a misnomer to call it just a bog. It is a peatland area or a wetland peatland area that has various habitats in it. So just interestingly, from an hydrological perspective and habitat, if you combine the two, these two diagrams gives you what we call what has been done an Ecotope Survey as a form of an ecological survey that was done on the Laois Bog parts. In 2009, just when the drains were blocked, an Ecotope Survey was done. So basically what the ecologists do is to compare the plant types and species and how many of them in a certain area combines, how the water formation and the pools and all of these factors are being taken into consideration, and you get this Ecotope Survey. So on the left-hand side, if you have little blue, that is active Laois bog. That is how a bog should function. And the purple is sort of very dry, very face bank, very dry areas of the bog. And then fast forward 11 years later, have a look on the right-hand side, 11 years on, look at the increase and how wet the Abbeyleix Bog has become since the drains were blocked. And this is why the restoration work and the rehabilitation work on Abbeyleix Bog is done.
Couple of minutes there, Chris.
Okay, so that is basically what is a combination between habitat and hydrology, which is very clear. Good. But obviously the surrounding areas, not only the Laois Bog, has formed their own sub-habitats, as you can see with these photographs, different type of habitats. And then all these habitats support certain plants. If you go into the more fenny area, wet areas, you look at different plants like these on the photograph. And when you have dampness, you also look at obviously fungi and mushrooms and stuff that is supported in all of these habitats. And then the wet woodlands, wet carr areas, if you can look at all these photographs, gives you a specific type of plants and species that grows there. Then key for us, obviously, on the Laois Bog itself is sphagnum, which is a key plant or key on that habitat for us, and is actually a combination or hollow cells, basically, that absorbs and hold water. Then the other thing, the importance of water in combination with wetland areas is obviously your key species or species, indicator species like dragonflies, and so there's a dragonfly laying eggs. Then the other one is when you get some semi-wet areas is the marsh fritillary, which we've been very successful lately the last couple of years. And then other species for us important that is supported by the habitats. Here's just photographs, the butterflies, the different insects. Obviously, when you get wetter, you get your other species that is more wetland, more peatland type of species like those. And then herbaceous plants, all sort of different plants that provides the food and the nectar. All these photographs that I've been showing now is taken on Abbeyleix Bog. There's no stock footage or anything. And then lastly, this is what it's all about. If you look at the big picture that you saw first of all, and you start going to the small, this is what it's all about. It's different variety of species and biodiversity. I didn't go into much detail. You can ask questions later, but that is it. Thanks, Ricky.
Deadly. Thanks a million, Chris. That's lovely and great photos. Yeah, that's great, and definitely that's a good reminder for questions. There's a Q&A section. If you just look at the bottom bar on your computer screen, you can ask questions there, and I will field them then to the experts after. So please do fill that up with plenty of questions, and I'll make sure to get them to the guys. The other thing is I'm going to launch a poll in a few minutes about what sites of the 5 that are covered that you visited or that you know about, just to get a measure of if the audience have been to some of these sites. And then lastly, my wonderful committee members in Wildlife Trust have started an I Donate page for the branch. If you feel like donating to our work, you'll find a link in the chat box in a few minutes. So if you like to talk and you want to support our work, it's there. Anything at all would be brilliant. So